Coming live from Kelvin Grove, Queensland, Australia is our guest this morning. Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through the industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Anthony Metivier, CEO of Advanced Education Technologies, founder of the Magnetic Memory Method, and we'll be talking about digital amnesia and the future of human memory in the age of AI with him. Welcome to the show, Anthony.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to India. Anthony, before if my memory serves me right, it is 1:30 in the afternoon there in Australia.
Thereabouts, yeah. That's
I haven't forgotten it. I haven't forgotten what you wrote to me, but just to ask you, this question is: why do people forget in the first place?
Well, it's an interesting question. One way to think about it is to think about magic. Magic tricks work precisely because people forget where they put their phones or their keys 2 minutes ago. So if you think about why do you not understand magic tricks? It's that exact same reason. You're not paying attention. And we forget things because we're not paying attention. But if we were to pay attention, and we were to pay attention in an educated way, we would find that we not only understand more and remember more, but we would be much more entertained and engaged, which is why magicians often say that they don't get bored of magic tricks, even if they know the secret, because they know that the real magic is to pay attention and to study the art and the craft. And I believe all the world is filled with art and craft, but so many of us miss it not because we forget, but because we're not paying attention in the first place.
Okay. So if you pay attention, you will not forget. Then why is it, Anthony, that when you pay attention, sometimes you get lost in what the person is saying? Is that paying attention, or is that forgetting or getting lost?
Well, there's lots of reasons that can happen, and it can come down to an individual's diet. It can come down to how well rested they are during that time of day, blood sugar levels. It can come down to the fact that they might be going through the motions of paying attention, but they aren't actually paying attention. Or it could be that they're not doing something in their mind in order to interact with the content. They're thinking about what they want to say next instead of what's actually being said, and then encoding it, which is what we can do with memory techniques.
Right. I will come down to the digital amnesia part, Anthony, but before I forget, I wanted to understand, is memory different? It works differently in men and women, because men seem to forget, all the important dates in the lives of their loved one in their own lives. And that's what they have been accused of. And then they say that women have very strong memory. They remember everything. How does it work there?
Well, I think that's a very, very complex question, and I don't necessarily know the answer, but what I would suggest is gender is not the way I would tackle this. The way I would tackle it is context. Who is the individual? What is the information? And what are the stakes? So I think that we could easily flip that on its head and say there are professionals in every category, professional mothers, for example, and there are unprofessional mothers who really don't get it. And it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that they're moms. It has to do with how they are moms. Likewise with dads, likewise with factory managers, likewise with teachers. It really has to do with the individual and what they're doing in their specific context, not what tackle they were born with.
Right. Anthony, now let's talk about digital amnesia and how we are forgetting things that we normally used to remember not so long ago. Yeah. How do we deal with this problem? Because it is rising by the day. Earlier, when phones came in, earlier to that, we remembered phone numbers. We remembered many other things. Then there is so much of automation. And now, with the AI coming in, how do we, because Earlier, we used to use our minds to write things. Now, AI will do everything for you. All you have to do is to remember prompts. So many places, universities, educational institutions, even in India, if I understand, in Bangalore, they have not allowed to use Chat GPT and all this stuff in studies and all that stuff. So, in this sort of a backdrop, what does human future of human memory look like? Is it that we have to live like this? We have to just live in this condition. Earlier computers it was, then it's now much more of artificial intelligence. How do you look at this whole situation, and then will come down to whether we want to take any steps to keep our human memory alive, or will it be all about the artificial intelligence?
Right, right. Good questions. And the first thing that I would suggest is everybody hit the pause button. There's a lot of people using the terms artificial and intelligence, and they're not really following the criticisms, the pushback. Some very, very intelligent people are saying, hang on a second, Chat GPT isn't even as smart as a cat, let alone a human, right? And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but put the pause button on, because it's not even clear that it's particularly artificial, let alone intelligent. And what do I mean by saying it's not artificial? Well, it's trained on human writing, right? So how is that artificial, right? And one of the problems, and I've not heard very few people talk about this, is that it's trained on boring writing, which is why it's producing largely boring writing. Now, the images are a little bit different, but I would hazard a guess that if you don't go to art galleries regularly, you probably are finding that imagery a lot more exciting than you would if you were a regular visitor to art galleries, because those images and the image generators are trained largely on boring imagery. But if you are a person who regularly challenges your mind, you'll see it very, very differently. So again, pause button, think of the larger context. Now, in terms of digital amnesia, Manfred Spitzer, Dr. Manfred Spitzer, was one of the first guys to raise the alarms. He was laughed at. He was literally laughed out of the house in Germany when he called it digitale Demenz, which is the German for digital dementia. I've personally used the term digital amnesia because I like to see light at the other end of the tunnel, but dementia seems like a very dark outcome. But if we take into account all of these criticisms of ChatGPT and so forth, and we think of all the positives, because it is astonishing. Wow, look, this computer's doing all this stuff. What we see, or what I think is going to happen, is that we just see more of the same, and the individuals who take care of their minds are always going to be the ones who win, because they have the bigger field in which to process all of this and to see the trends. Even the founders of these technologies don't think that they're all that great. It's only just getting started. Give it 100 years, and right now, understand that you have the opportunity to protect your brain, and you should protect it no matter what cool things are going on in technology. You should protect it even if you get a brain implant. I mean, all the more so because now you've opened up your head and you are taking on the risk of getting infections that need constant maintenance and so forth. So I think not much has changed, not nearly as much as people think that it has. And it really just, there's a paradox, right? Because we don't really need to memorize phone numbers anymore. Is it a good thing to still be able to memorize numbers? Absolutely. But we're kind of going against something cool. It is cool that we can have our phones memorize the numbers. So why don't we memorize numbers that are a little bit more important than phone numbers? Let the technology do its work. But do you know all your emergency numbers in case that, the technology fails? What if you have to get in hold of your bank and you've lost all the documents, or someone stole it, or heaven forbid, you lost your Bitcoin key, etc., right? These things are still well worth memorizing, but it's just a little bit of a different emphasis. So I think that we want to find a blend between the two technologies and just realize that our brain is still an amazing technology. It has not been deprecated by machines. Far from it.
Right. So You are the expert. You are the founder of magnetic memory method. I will come specifically to that, Anthony. First is, how do we get our memory back if we have not lost it, but it's like you have kept it somewhere or kept it aside? uh,
Right.
in terms of focus and concentration, and in terms of, as you said, the important number. Sometimes if you lose your phone, you even forget the most important number because you lose it, you just don't know what to do about it. Earlier it
Mhm.
was not the case. So let's look at from 2 points. One is people of my generation, your generation, who know about, they have a background to things. They know about what earlier times were, where people were living without computers, even without phones, and even without computers, and things were still working. But the new generation, you can say the Y and Z, who are at this point, they have just only seen the digital age. Everything from mobile phones to computers, everything of their life is has been around these things. They don't have that background, so
Mhm.
they don't have that reference point. How do these sets of people get their memory back, get their concentration back? Because the younger generation has a long way to go. And still, for us also, a lot of people, it is so great to just be human, and not too much dependent, and read books, go to real art galleries, go to see the sun and the moon and the sky and be happy about it and the way they are, rather than just looking at pictures or creation of artificial texts about such things, which may look as if the world is such a beautiful place, but actually we have forgotten the reality of it all, as if we forget the taste of the real good human life. How do you look at it? Solve the problem for us so that we can follow that path.
Well, this is the thing. You have to want to solve the problem. So when the individual says, I really want to have memory like this other person has, or I want to be able to speak like this other person can speak, or what have you have to say, I want it. What are the steps to follow? Then you have to pick the teacher that you're going to follow, and you've got to commit, I believe, at least for 90 days. And I'm all for people studying multiple memory trainers, but just pick one and stick with them for at least 90 days. Why? Because you need time to have brain connections form, literal neurogenesis in your brain. And that will help you get it. Now, you might get it a lot faster. There are people who get this within 9 hours, not 90 days. There are people who get it in 9 weeks, etc. But just as a general framework, in order to really have things switch on, stick to things for much longer than feels comfortable. Then add on the next and the next and the next. And you may find that you don't need to add on the next. That's great too. But at the end of the day, if you don't want it, and if you don't pick it and you don't stick with it, you're going to have a harder time. And then the next thing is just to practice it. Make it a practice every day. So for example, when I was looking at your profile, I was reading some of your things and it said that you worked with Press Trust of India, I think it said, right? I'd never
Right,
heard of this. Reuters was easy for me to memorize. CNBC was easy for me to, I didn't even have to do anything. It's just like, I know those brands, right? But Press Trust of India, I was like, I don't know this. I want to remember this about AJ. And so
yes,
what I did is I actually walk my talk and I say, okay, so what am I going to use for press? And I thought of the musician Prince with a bass guitar pressing the strings. Trust. There's a Megadeth album called Trust. And then, the India part kind of comes along with it. And then I just think, I'm going to go out on a limb and actually test this, see if I got that right. And by the way you reacted, I think I did. Maybe I made a little mistake and you're being kind. But nonetheless, the point is that I actually use the techniques. And those are the techniques. I see something, Press Trust of India, and I go, okay, what am I going to do to memorize it? And that's called elaboration. Thinking about Prince, pressing strings, but it's elaboration alphabetically. It's not Prince for no reason. It's Prince because press has PR in it, right? And so he's the alphabetical equation that fits there. Could be somebody else, Prince Albert or whatever, but the point is that it's a PR person, right?
right,
So
right.
practice that. Practice it every opportunity that you have. On the screen, you have my name and you can think of Ant-Man, for example, and you're just looking, A-N-T, what's that like? And that can help you really, really focus while you're reading. Because when you're distracted, you just look at, like, I often get distracted when I'm reading. I'm like everybody else, but I bring back my concentration. I look for the word the, and then I imagine Thor's hammer coming down, because TH, Thor, the, and he's just hitting that the, and it brings me back to focus just through elaboration and using the techniques.
Right. What about the younger lot? How do they learn about these things? Because for them, it's all, even learning is on computers, especially during COVID. On computers, phones around, phones everywhere, mom and dad both on phones. Their life is around digital stuff. How do they make sure that you know they they learn something and it remains with them for a long, long time? How do they do that?
Well, they are going to need more guidance from adults. And so I think it's wrong to place responsibility on young people. They've got enough responsibilities. They're being told to go to school, etc. What we need is our adults to stand up and to maybe take some guidance from things like apparently what China does with TikTok. You're allowed to look at TikTok for like 30 hours a month or something like that when you're a kid. I think it's like 30 minutes a day even. They change these factors all the time, but they actually lock it for kids, and they don't let them see all kinds of weird content. They sort of restrict the content. And so if parents would step up and they would say, we're going to spend 3 hours today with these print books so that your mind has some digital fasting and you're locating information in space the way your ancestors did, then they're going to have a head start on not having digital amnesia. All the time, parents come to me, how do I get my kids to learn these memory techniques, etc.? And I say, it starts with you, right? Be part of the league of extraordinary parents who says, I'm going to be the difference I want to see in the world. And then start to preach to your children. Relegating it to your kids, I don't believe is the answer. Or relegating it to the schools. That also isn't the answer. But if we want to see school reform, it's going to happen when teachers are required to be able to memorize 30 names in 3 minutes or less. And then they'll just start naturally teaching those skills to the kids. So I think it's quite simple, but changing human nature is not simple. But those are some ways that you can do it. Be the change that you want to see. Don't relegate it to others. Relegating things to machines is what got us here. That's the problem that got us here. Take the individual responsibility.
Right. And I forgot the Press Trust of India part was perfectly correct. You remembered it well and well enough. Not even one word was, misplaced there. And actually, that's the largest Indian news agency. India just formed it immediately after independence. That was in early 50s. And it's still running very strong. So a lot of newspapers are dependent on it, a lot of information. And, that's why we have a vibrant press. A lot of things they can get from the Press Trust of India without, smaller publications have to pay less. That's what I last know of, but it's running very, very strong. And a lot of journalism I learned, it's considered as the nursery of Indian journalism. So that's it.
Here's another example of things that parents could do to teach their kids. Parents should do this and then teach their kids to do it. Is you just said the 50s, right? And so I instantly make an image for that, which helps me now add that information. And in this case, the image I use is the lasso that Wonder Woman uses, because that's my image for 50, right? I just see Wonder Woman slinging something around a newspaper in India. Now, if a parent shows this to their kids and they're reciting facts, and the kid is naturally going to be like, Dad, how do you do this? Right? Then you're going to have, it's like oral tradition is big in India, from what I understand. I studied sitar
for absolutely
maybe 10 years. I studied sitar, and my teacher said, don't write anything down. Learn how to learn from what I'm saying. Right. And so, we have the Mizrab and the Chikari strings and all these stroke orders. And I had to learn it verbally without writing it down, which is one of the best things that I could do for my memory. So adults, take this on, learn the memory techniques, then demonstrate it to your kids. And then when somebody says something to you, well, that's from the 50s, you'll remember it because you associate it with one of these images. It's very powerful.
Very powerful. What is your magnetic memory method? And how does it work? If people can understand that better and through that make their memory strong.
Well, it works by combining thousands of years of tradition with the best of contemporary memory science and all the things I've learned hanging out with memory competitors, competing a little bit myself so that I understand what goes on in memory competitions, and then just also talking with a lot of memory scientists, memory experts, just reading as much as I can and practicing as much as I can so that I have an understanding that I'm teaching not just what I think or not what I read from somebody else, but what I actually know through practice. And so what it is it's placing information in space. So if we were to think of, press times of India or whatever, I can place right here in my bookshelf images that when I think back to it, what was happening there? Oh, Prince is pressing the strings on his bass, that sort of thing. Or I can take a deck of cards and just think, what was happening right here? And I go, oh, that was the 4 of clubs, and then I have the 4 of clubs right there. And then what was the 4 of clubs doing? And I go, oh, that's the 2 of hearts. And I can go through this entire deck if you like, because I memorized it. And it's just images hanging in space. In the case of a deck of cards, it's 52 images hanging in space. And I can go through it mentally, get it into long-term memory, and you can too. So all you have to do is pick rooms, learn these principles, like I was talking about, Wonder Woman for the number 50 or Prince for the word press, etc. And then start to hang them in space in your own home, in your workplace, practice recalling on that basis. Before you know it, the information will come back to you faster than you can think of your associations. That's what I teach. I teach it in depth and I teach it with passion and care. And I just love doing it. It's been more than 10 years. And that's what the magnetic memory method is. Literally picking it and then sticking it in space as if you're putting a fridge magnet in any room that you want or over a person's shoulder or what have you. And then you're able to recall it better.
Right. How did you discover this method? Was it always the same way where you always associating things with different things to remember? Or was it just like any other normal human being?
That's how the techniques work. So I don't think that's ever going to change unless something comes along that changes it, but I doubt it. That's the way information is. Information is interlocking through association. I discovered it when I was in university. I had a really bad depression. I was about to just drop out, or even worse, I had really bad depression. So one can imagine some of the things that depressed people go through. Or I was very interested in magic. So I thought maybe I can become a street magician because I'm clearly going to drop out of university. And a long story short, I found magic tricks and I found a trick that involves a memorized deck. And I thought, this is going to be impossible. There's no way I can remember a deck of cards. But I was able to do it. And I instantly saw that if I could get this onto this, then like anything from any book, any language onto this, I could memorize it the exact same way. I started and I've never stopped. It was a decade before I started teaching the techniques, but I've just never stopped. And my practice gets better and better and better the more that I do it, teaching it, studying it, using it in my own practice. It's amazing. And I was surprised that I found later research that shows these techniques have been clinically proven to improve your mood and help you remove or reduce the impact of depression.
Right. What sort of people come to you for training? And then you've got these advanced education methodologies. If you can tell about these.
Well, Advanced Education Methodologies is the name of my publishing company, and Magnetic Memory Method is part of that. And one of the challenges that I face, and it's a beautiful challenge, is that everybody under the sun comes to me. So somebody will say, look, I really want to learn Spanish, but I also want to learn how to tango, fly a plane, and all the countries in the world, plus the capitals and the population. And that's a wonderful thing, but it means I help everybody. And business and things like that. It's kind of hard to get that focus. So I try to just help people focus on one of those goals, get one of them done, and then you will see how to memorize all the rest.
Right, right. So you mean focus is only on one thing. People talk of multitasking.
Mm.
How do you see that? What would you tell them? Because bosses say multitask. A lot of people say multitask. Even I've been told multitask, but I have realized that I can do only one thing. Then when I do my shows, people say, you are a great listener. But this is the only thing I need to do. I have to listen, and that is only where I can ask questions. So why do
Mm.
they talk of multitasking? How do you look at it vis-a-vis memory?
It's fascinating. I've got a slightly different view. I have been a student of Harry Kane for a long time, who taught multiple mentality, it's called. So Harry Kane, what he used to do is you'd hang him upside down and he would write a poem from memory with his left hand. He would write the digits of pi with his right hand. And then he sometimes had ways of, or, like finger extensions, and he would write three or four things, like audiences would shout things at him and he would start to do that as well. So I thought, this is great. I'm going to try and study this. And what I realized over the years, like when I go and do name demonstrations, I am multitasking because I'm memorizing 30, 40 names and I'm doing a number of operations in my head. I'm adding details that they tell me about themselves, like where they work or what have you. And it is multitasking. I think the problem is that people have a small working memory. And working memory is basically like the size of your desktop. So if you have a very small desktop and it's cluttered, you're going to have a hard time finding things. But if your desktop is big and you have some organization, you're going to be able to juggle more things. So really, I think it comes down to training the mind and training it in specific ways that are related to your topics. And I've always throughout my career ran multiple websites. I've written multiple books in different categories of topics and so forth. I haven't hit all of them out of the park, but I still managed to juggle it all. And I think that ability to manage it comes from constant working memory, making sure it's as big as possible. And just also knowing when to focus on one thing, but also knowing when to have variety. Because I think variety is not just the spice of life. It's part of how success works. So I don't know the total answer for all people, but I think a lot of people could juggle more things than they think, but they do need to do some preparatory work. And Harry Kane's multiple mentality is a great way to get started with that. And a lot of my training is inspired by it and based on it. And I think you can get there just by doing memory training.
Right, Anthony. I think you have wonderfully explained it, given your perspective also, and I understand it because you have to have variety as well as you need to know what thing to focus at one point in time, but at the same time you need to also make sure can do several things around that particular one thing. Wonderful. Now, in terms of how do people connect with you, Anthony, if they want to know or get more free resources, get training from you, or even to business deals in terms of advanced education methodologies.
Please just visit the main website, magneticmemorymethod.com. Or I believe if you just search Anthony and memory, I come up these days. But yeah, magneticmemorymethod.com is my site. And yeah, I think just searching Anthony and memory, you'll find me.
Right, right. My last question to you, Anthony, is that from the times of you said there was a problem of depression, then you dealt with it, and now you are you are helping others. You have a good business, and in terms of now even Google remembers you in terms of memory. So that's a great position to be in. But then where do you want to go from here? How do you see that?
Well, one of the projects that I started last year, it took me over a year and a quarter to get to launching the first experiment, was to release a game. And the game is connected with a novel. And the novel is about a detective who has early cognitive decline. He has PTSD, and he solves the case because he learns to train his memory, and it helps him save lives. And in the game, we kind of play loosely in that narrative world, and people get memory exercise whether they're using memory techniques or not. So they manage to be around people who already use the techniques, have some of that magic and wonder rub off on them. They get more insight into how the techniques work, but they'll also get memory exercise even if they're not ready to use the memory techniques. So throughout the next year, speaking of multitasking, I'm going to be doing some more of these games, but also sticking with traditional memory training and just exploring this idea of teaching through story, teaching through essentially live theatrical games, and seeing if we can get more people to look at this from a completely different angle. Because I experience it as a game in my head. I experience it as just like being at an arcade, the way that I'm playing with these images like Prince, you know, pressing things in order to achieve this result and helping other people have that much fun. So that's part of the way that I see it going. But I don't see it as an alternative to traditional learning. I don't see it as a replacement. I see it as a supplement because I think we still need serious learning, introduction, foundation, nuance, and then conclusion and all that sort of stuff that is involved in traditional education. I don't see that going away. I could be wrong. I'll be the first to admit if I was wrong, but I don't see it. And when I want to learn something seriously, like I am doing just today, I go to a course. Yes, the brain has been rewired to just go, come on, get to the point, all that stuff. But I just remind myself that that's the rewiring of the mind from the internet. That's not reality. And I watch very diligently. I got my notebooks here to take notes, and I've already learned amazing things because I just had the willingness to sit there, take notes, not skip around, and absorb and memorize as I go. So that's what I'm working on, and it's variety at the end of the day, but as a supplement, never a replacement or an alternative fully to what I believe is going to be important traditional learning for a very long time.
On this note, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.